So that was some video shot with the Insta360 Go 2 in a kind of low light nighttime conditions. Now that is what this video is going to be about. I'm going to be showing you the settings you need to use, how you can set up this camera for shooting in those kinds of environments. Now it is winter here in the southern, nope, I don't live in the southern hemisphere. It is winter here in the northern hemisphere, which means it is very dark a lot of the time. So if you want to be using this camera and if you want to be shooting at nighttime, then there are some things you should know to get the best quality footage possible. Now, I did do quite a similar video to this last year for a different camera, the Insta360 One X2, and these are pretty similar videos because it's using the same technology and the same app. But in any case, if you just have this camera, this is going to be useful. And I guess I probably should have done this before Christmas because that's when all of the kind of lights were out, but oh well, maybe it'll be useful next year. And also when I talk about low light, I'm not really talking about actually in pitch black conditions, because cameras like these, action cameras, small cameras, do not have the required sensor technology, the sensor size, to be able to shoot good quality in very, like, literally no lighting available. So when I talk about low light, I'm more talking about in a city where the contrast between bright lights and the night sky is very apparent, it's very large, and there might actually be lots of bright lights around. So this is where we need to go into the camera settings and change some things. So let's get into it. Let's see what this camera can do in these kind of low light nighttime conditions and the kind of settings that are best to use to get the best footage. Let's go. This video is shot with the Insta360 Go 2 in its automatic video mode, which is not the best mode to shoot in. Let's see what happens when we shoot to a different mode. This is shot with the ISO priority mode, which means it's kind of automatically trying to improve the image. It's still not full manual, but you can see it's a little bit better. And finally, this video has been shot with full manual control where I've changed pretty much every setting. If we combine the automatic to the manual mode, you can see it's a big improvement, at least I think so. Let's go in to see how I did that. The first thing you need to decide is the frame rate that you're going to be shooting in. Now this will depend not only on your location in the world, but also if you're going to be moving or not. If you are going to be keeping still, you're going to want to shoot in 24 or 25 frames per second. If you're located in the US or North America, or in fact South America, you would choose 24 frames per second. If you were in the UK, Europe, and pretty much most of the rest of the world, you'd choose 25 frames per second. Choosing the correct one based on your location will avoid any flickering lights. If you're going to be doing a lot of movement, then you would select a higher frame rate. If you're in the UK, 50 frames per second. If you were in the US, 60. Because I'm going to be moving quite a lot, I chose 50 frames per second. Okay, now let's go into the manual mode. This is done using the app. You have basically three options. You can select your ISO, which you should put to the lowest possible, either 100 or 200. You also have shutter speed. As a rule of thumb, you're going to want to set your shutter speed to twice the number that you set your frame rate. So if I chose to shoot in 50 frames per second, I would choose a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. And finally, white balance, which can drastically impact the look of your video and the kind of colors that are going to come through. And once again, you can see the difference here. It can have a huge impact if you go in and change all of those settings. The thing that is most variable, I would say, depending on where you are, is white balance. If you are shooting lights that are very white or very blue, then I would suggest sticking to a light balance of around 2700. That kind of gives that very bluish, wintry effect, which I think looks quite good with those kind of lights. If you wanted something more colorful, if the lights were very colorful, then raise the white balance to around 4300, 4700, I think it is. And yeah, that will give it a much more vibrant effect. But it is important to stick to a continuous white balance so that if you're moving around, the kind of colors stay the same, everything looks the same. So just to reiterate, keeping a low frame rate if you are not moving, if the video is going to be still, so 24, 25 frames per second, sticking to a shutter speed that's roughly twice your frame rate, keeping the ISO as low as possible, and choosing a continuous white balance depending on the temperature of the main light source in your shot. One thing you should avoid that I discovered is moving around without a kind of tripod or something to stabilize the footage. Now, even though this camera is good at stabilizing its own footage in the daytime, when shooting at night and walking around with the camera attached to you, it's going to create a kind of blurry effect when you are walking around with bright lights against a dark background. It just doesn't work that well. But otherwise, I think you can get some really good footage, especially if you attach the camera to something where it's not moving at all, or you have a tripod, or even using it, or even just using it in your hand. At least then you can stabilize it that way. It's not too bad. For a camera that is, once again, so tiny, I think it does a decent job. And then you're probably noticing that there is quite a lot of grain and quite a lot of noise, even after you've used that manual mode. Now, that is something that is really quite unavoidable. There's not much you can do. There are some noise reduction options. In fact, in the Insta360 app. On a large screen, a camera of this size is always going to create noise in dark conditions like these. But when viewed on a mobile phone or on a small screen, it's going to be way less obvious. And let's face it, the Insta360 Go 2 was designed to create content for mobile, not necessarily for a large TV or a laptop screen. So it's not as big of a deal as it may seem. But overall, I was actually pretty impressed with the kind of shots you can get, even in these difficult conditions, which for a camera, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, this would not have been possible. Bearing in mind the tiny size of this camera, especially if you're going to be creating stuff for TikTok, Instagram, just for a mobile audience. For any screen bigger than that, you're going to notice the grain, the noise, and the slight lack of quality, but that's not what it was built for. Okay guys, so I hope that was useful. That was a kind of low light nighttime shooting tutorial with the Insta360 Go 2. Now, it's not that complicated. I'm pretty sure anyone could do it. To sum it up, make sure the camera's not moving too much because that will make everything more difficult. Keep the ISO to the lowest level possible, but not so low that you can't see anything. And just make sure you're using that full manual mode and changing everything to maybe what I suggested, but whatever circumstances works for you in the situation you're in. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can check out my review of this camera on my website or this channel. But until next time, I hope you had a good new year, and I will see you later in 2022. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can check out my review of this camera on my website or this channel. But until next time, I hope you had a good new year, and I will see you later in 2022. Bye.